Welcome back. We have our Flask application that saves user contact information to a CSV file. And this is all great. It's working really, really nicely, right? We have a beautiful website. We even have contact forms. But there's a problem here. You see, we're running the browser as well as the server on the same computer. But this isn't real life, because if I give this URL to a friend, they're not going to be able to see it because this address points to localhost. It's saying localhost like this. It's the same thing, but localhost simply means your computer. So it's not like anybody else but us can access our app. That's not very fun, is it? Ideally, we can create this app so we can send it to all our friends, our family members, and possibly future employers. So how can we do this? In this video, I'm going to show you a really fun, easy way to deploy your application or your website online. We're going to use something called Python Anywhere. And Python Anywhere is going to allow us to host our files, that is, all the files that we have here, onto a server that they give us for free. So this is completely free. All you have to do is simply log in, and you can click on sign up. You can see that they have different pricing plans. So you can actually pay for their service, but for a beginner plan where you can create one web application, we can do that for free. So let's create a beginner account and create your username and password. Agree to the terms. Sure, I've read everything. Oh, somebody else took my username. How dare they? Let's go with Andre N. So again, create your own account. And there we go. We have our dashboard. Now, the way Python Anywhere works is that we need to load up the files on a machine. Kind of like how we have our files over here on our computer, we need to somehow upload them to Python Anywhere's computers. Now, the way we can do that is using GitHub. So I'm going to open up my GitHub account. I'm going to click on New Repositories. And I'm going to create my project here. So let's just call it Portfo, because it sounds kind of cool and all the trendy names are short like this. So this is my portfolio project. I'm going to keep it public and then initialize with a README and then create repository. Now, from here, I'm going to clone this repository. If you have SSH set up, you can copy the SSH, otherwise use HTTPS, which might ask you for your GitHub password when you clone. So all I have to do now is to open up a new terminal. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And say git clone, and then copy and paste the URL so that it clones our project. Now from here, if I open this, we have our web server and then our portfolio, which is our GitHub account. So we can just copy the files here. Now, the ones that we actually need is we need the database, CSV, because these are going to be the files that we want to upload to Python Anywhere. So for now, let's just select the CSV file, the server.py, the static folder, the templates folder, because those are all the files that run our Flask app. Now, if I copy and paste this in here, you might be asking yourself, what about the other files? Well, there's a neat trick here, because these files over here were created because of our virtual environment, right? We have things like Flask installed. We have libraries like Python 3.7. We have our PyCache folder. Essentially, these folders created the virtual environment for us. However, there's an interesting trick here that we can do. we can run a command called pip freeze. And remember, you might have to do pip 3 based on what type of installation you have of Python on your machine. But if you do pip freeze with this little arrow and then requirements.txt, notice what happens as that requirements.txt gets added to my project. Watch this. Do you see that? I get a requirements.txt. And this requirements.txt, if we click on it, we see here that we have the requirements for our app to work. And the cool thing about this is that the Flask and then the Jinja for our templating, which we actually include in our libraries here, can now be used with the requirements.txt to not necessarily upload them to GitHub, but instead use this file as a way for us to install on any future machines any of these dependencies. I'll show you what I mean. For example, what we could do is upload all of these files to Python Anywhere, right? But that's a lot of files and a lot of work. Instead, we only upload the critical files that we wrote plus the requirements.txt, and automatically Python Anywhere is going to be able to install Flask and the Jinja and all the other requirements by looking at the requirements.txt. So for now, let's go back to our desktop and copy the requirements.txt as well into our Portfolio page. So we now have all the files that we need for GitHub. If we go back, we can simply go into our Portfolio folder and then simply say git add everything, then git commit and give it some sort of a message, my portfolio website. There we go. And then finally, git push origin master. And just like that, if I go back to GitHub and I refresh, look at that. I have all my files for my portfolio project. So using GitHub, we can now upload really easily to our Python Anywhere dashboard. The way we're going to do this is to actually now clone this repo with all these files, and we'll use HTTPS. Let's copy this and then go to our dashboard. Now in here, in the console, we can hit bash. So this will open up the terminal where our computer that is hosted by Python Anywhere exists. Let's make this a little bit bigger. In here, I can say git clone and clone this repo. There we go. And now, if we do ls, and remember this is a Linux machine, so Linux commands like ls is going to work. So we see that we have the readme text and the portfolio. So let's go into portfolio. And we see here that we have, look at that, all our files on our machine. Now, the cool thing is that if I go back to the dashboard and I go into my files, you see here that in the directories, I have a portfolio project, which is my files that we've created. How cool is that? So I now have all the files necessary for me to run the app. But how can we run an app? Well, we have a web app tab. So remember, with the free tier, we get access to one free web app. So let's open up the web tab and add a new web app. So unfortunately, with the free tier, you can't have custom domain names. That is a way for you to say andrenagoe.com or whatever website you want. Instead, they're going to generate one for you. But that's something that you can look into on your own if you want to pay for it. But for now, let's just use the free tier. So we can select the Python framework that we want to use. And I'm actually going to do manual configuration. We can pick whatever Python version we want. Let's do 3.6 for now because that's what we've been using. And then finally click Next. There we go. We have our Python project at this URL address. But if I click on this, all right, I get a hello world. It's working, but this isn't our portfolio. So how can we make that work? There's a few things that we need to set up. First, I'm going to link you to this tutorial on showing you how to set it up in case you have any problems. But let's go step by step. First, what we need to do is scroll down and enter the source code. So that is, where is the code that we're looking for? If you remember, let's go over here to Files. We have our Portfo folder. So what we want to do in the web is to say that we want Portfo in here. And it's going to automatically create that link for us. So that's where our source code, our server code exists. Now, if we go back here, we've gotten our code onto Python Anywhere, and then we have to set up our virtual environment. So we have to open up our console. Let's make this a little bit bigger, and then just run these commands. So in our case, because we're using Python 3.6, we're just going to copy this, go to our dashboard, into the bash once again. So that is the computer that we're going to serve our files from. And then copy and paste to create a virtual environment called my_virtual_env. And while that's installing, our next task is to install Flask. So once again, we'll copy this. So let's run pip install Flask. And you'll notice here as Flask is being installed that we're now in a virtual environment. See here how it says my_virtual_env, which was what we told it to name our virtual environment. And then the next step is to run this command. Well, actually this command won't do anything because this command, work on, simply takes us to our virtual environment, which we already have created. This is for next time whenever you, let's say, go back and open up the console to make sure that you're always working in our virtual environment. Now in here, if I look at the files, I have my Portfo project, but I can also run using the requirements.txt that we have. In case we have a lot of dependencies, we can actually run this command so that it reads our requirements.txt to install any dependencies. Oh, couldn't open up the file because we have to cd into our Portfo first, and then run this command. In our case, we don't have that many requirements and everything is set since we installed Flask. But this is how we can use the requirements.txt to install all our dependencies. Awesome. So going back to the tutorial, we see that we've set up our virtual environment and we need to go to our web tab to set up our virtual environment so that it knows where the web tab to look for this environment. So going back, we can now go to our web. And I know this is confusing. This is what happens when you do configuration on a website. It's one of those things that you just have to learn or follow documentation. In here, in the virtual env, we will simply, as they ask, add the name of our virtual environment, which is my_virtual_env. So again, we'll copy this and automatically it gives us the link. Now finally, if we reload our application, it'll take a few seconds, but when it's done and I click, I get the hello world. Something is still not right because we want our server to be running, right? So it serves us the index.html. This video is getting long, so let's take a break and see you in the next video.